Good afternoon and welcome to today's post agenda on the Affordable Housing Bond Spending Plan. We are joined by the director of the URA as well as a number of other URA employees. We have Director Chipnopoli with us, and we are also, for the record, joined by Councilwoman Strasburger, Councilman Mosley, and Councilman Coghill, who didn't like this idea but now wants to spend the money.
I'm expecting to be wowed by good things. Change my mind. It's not that I don't like the idea, it's the $32 million in interest.
We understand. Okay. But now that we have it, he also wants to spend it. So yeah. I will turn it over. I'm not sure who wants to lead, but I believe the URA has a presentation.
Yeah, I can start with some opening remarks, and then I'll turn it over to the team to take you through the presentation and the spending plan, that they transmitted. So first, I do want to thank this body for approving it or their excitement on moving the plan forward, whether they voted for it or not. As we look at it, I think it's an important position that the council, as a body took and the administration took in expressing, the importance of affordable housing for us as a city, for its future, and really sort of the urgency of the problem or the crisis before us right now. It is the first affordable housing bond in the city's history. I think that is something to celebrate. And the plan that the team has devised here, it was something that Council 1 put in as one of their requirements for the legislation. We were planning to do anyways, and we're excited to we took the time the 90 days that you all gave us after the resolution, or after we closed on the bond, I should say. We did transmit it to council earlier this month, and are excited to be here before you today. So thank you for having us and making the time so that we could publicly review it with everyone here. So I'll turn it over to Director Nomani Stenger and the rest of the team.
Before doing so, I just remember, just to inform members, if members didn't know, because I think this is actually something to celebrate. The URA, and you can go into it more with your remarks, recently closed using the ARP dollars that we sent, the home ARP dollars that we sent over, just closed on our 100th home. And last week we had a public hearing in here regarding the LRTA, and for downtown, the LRTA tax abatement. And what I discovered was a number of the SEIU employees who came to speak in support of that have actually utilized that program to purchase their first home. So it is really working, and I just wanted to put that out there for members who didn't or may not have known. Sorry, Director.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you for bringing that up. That was not part of my opening remarks, but it is a milestone worth celebrating for sure.
Yeah.
Home ownership and.
Go ahead. No, well, just before you get started on the remarks, I think. Thank you for bringing it up, Council President. It is certainly something to celebrate. That is 100 residents, in the city, the overwhelming majority of which are first-time homeowners, and many of which are new to the city. And I think it's an important also context piece as the team walks you through the plan for why we've chosen to focus on certain areas, because we do have such a significant investment through the ARPA funds that the city has provided that are really targeted mostly towards home ownership opportunities, right? So that's why you'll see this kind of focused in other areas. So thank you for bringing that up. And I'm sorry, Director, I'll turn it over to you.
That's a good point, because our overall investment strategy for affordable housing is a balanced approach. So my name's Sushila Nimani Stenger. I'm the Executive Director of the URA, and I'd like to ask the team to introduce themselves now as well.
David Geiger, Director of Government and Strategic Affairs at the URA.
Kiana Wassler, Chief Housing Officer at the URA.
Ben Payton, Manager of Residential Lending at the URA.
Thank you. And then we also have Talia O'Brien here with us. She's our new Government Affairs Analyst. So if we could go to the next slide. Thank you. So the URA's mission is to foster sustainable prosperity across all of Pittsburgh, essentially advancing programs and projects that result in inclusive growth. Next slide, please. And so shifting into the topic of today for affordable housing, we hope that as we move through the content of the slides and discuss the programs that we are proposing for your engagement with, we are seeing a level of shared goals with the URA and the city. And, as you will see throughout the spending plan, we are responding to the current affordable housing market demands and increased financial needs for development projects, while also ensuring that those investments are made through this bond to, one, create and preserve affordable housing that is consistent with community goals. And as you can see in the next slide, we have done significant engagement with our stakeholders. And this is an iterative approach. We've worked with them before the bond. We continue to work with them, and it will go on into the future. So create and preserve affordable housing that's consistent with community goals, and two, result in lasting affordability and increase the city's tax base. Way back, within the past 10 years, the URA's mission was to increase taxes and create jobs. Those are also still important goals for us. And as you'll see in our robust pipeline of affordable housing projects, all of the projects do result in increased taxes. So next slide, please. Okay, shifting to the affordable housing bond. So as you know, we did close on the bond December 28th, 2023, the end of last year. The gross amount, the project funds available for projects, is $30.64 million. Next slide. And again, I did talk about the purpose and the shared goals for increased housing and increased availability of affordable housing. And we're not looking to create any new programs. The programs that we have do meet the needs of the communities that we serve. And so we are only proposing one new program, and that was as a result of feedback that we heard during the process of working with you in the advancement of this bond in the middle and toward the end of last year. Next slide. Okay, so the financial details are here, which is the bonds mature between 2024 and 2048, yielding the interest rate blended up on the screen. And fortunately, the UR received a rating of A+ from S&P Global Ratings. And as you also know, and thank you so much for your support of this, is that the city's contribution of $2.5 million made annually for 25 years is the guarantee related to the bond issuance. Next slide. I believe I turn it over then to my colleague. Okay, one more. All right. And as I mentioned before, the bond, through this co-op agreement, will not just leverage the fund and the bond proceeds, but we are looking to leverage additional state and federal resources that are available in order to build that capital stack needed to advance complex affordable housing projects. Next slide, please. Okay. So then this is where I turn it over to my colleague, and Kiana will walk us through the programs and the categories in which we envision deploying the funding.
Thank you, Director Stanger. As Director Stanger mentioned, we are planning to use the majority of the bond funds in programs that already exist at the URA. Those include the following: the Rental Gap Program, which provides gap financing loans to developers for the creation and preservation of affordable housing. This is designed to increase the supply of affordable housing in the city of Pittsburgh. Also, the Housing Preservation Program, which helps fund the acquisition of existing subsidized or naturally occurring affordable rental units to prevent the loss of existing affordable housing stock in the city. Then the Downtown Conversion Program, which provides loans to convert underutilized office buildings into residential units. And lastly, the For Sale Development Program, which provides construction financing for developers for the substantial rehab of new construction or affordable for sale housing. We are also considering the creation of a new program. This would be a new construction or bridge loan fund, which could support development projects that require construction financing, and this would be at a below market interest rate, which would make it very attractive to the development community right now, as interest rates have skyrocketed. We are considering creating this structure because this could provide an opportunity to decrease total project costs for a developer by creating a decreased interest rate for the project. It would provide, while also providing a return to the URA on the funds. So now we'll start to focus in on the affordable housing demand that the city has been seeing in the recent years. So what's on the screen now are the LIHTC awards that were received from Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, or PHFA, in 2022. This is the most recent award round that PHFA has had. In this round, the city of Pittsburgh won 6 9% awards. And the 9% LIHTC awards are a competitive awarding process through the state. The city was very fortunate to receive 6 of these awards. We are hopeful to continue this trend in the next round of LIHTC awards, which hopefully will be this summer, 2024. So as we continue on with this example, what the URA currently offers through the rental gap program, $1.25 million as gap financing available to each project in the city of Pittsburgh, each LIHTC project, right? So if we're continuing on with this example, all 6 of those awards would have come to the URA for at least $7.5 million towards their projects. Because in 2022 we were still experiencing COVID escalations and all of the market changes that happened because of COVID, which caused increase in construction costs, all of those projects will just, as for our example here, more than likely requested $500,000 in additional funds from the URA. This is an estimation, not exact. But that would require at least $3 million additional dollars to be funded towards those projects. So if we look at 2022's LIHTC round, for 6 projects, the URA was received an estimated request, of $10.5 million in gap financing. And with that example of these 6 projects and $10.5 million, we would have received in return 245 low-income housing tax credit units created. So if we continue on beyond 2022's LIHTC round and look at what's happening currently, the downtown conversion program has a very robust pipeline of candidates who are interested in that program, for their projects. And we are seeing there's at least 6 to 8 projects in that pipeline now looking for gap financing from the URA for their projects. And then through our housing preservation program, which is intended to quickly deploy funding so that we do not lose any affordable housing stock in the city of Pittsburgh, we do have an ARPA award for this program of $8.9 million. We were able to commit within a year that funding to approximately 11 projects, and that funding will go towards preserving 685 plus affordable units, with 348 of those being single room occupancy units. So if we think about our 2022 LIHTC round needing approximately $10 million for 6 projects, having approximately 6 to 8 projects in the pipeline for downtown, and then our housing preservation program and how busy it's been in the past year, we understand that to help kind of solve the crisis of affordable housing and continue to move projects forward, we will need a significant amount of resources to support the ecosystem. So this, on this screen, is the 2023-2024 LIHTC applications that the URA received pre-application for. So there's many projects here in the 9% round. Again, those are competitive awards. We hoped again to receive 4 to 6, hopefully, in the city of Pittsburgh. The total request of the URA is $31 million, 638 units contemplated to be created there. The 4% low-income housing tax credit is what we call as of right, or as long as their application is in good shape. Those ones are not competitive, and we do expect those to be moved through an approval process. We received 4 to 5 applications there for a total of $7.3 million from the URA in gap financing, and that will create or preserve 356 units. So this is kind of where we are currently in 2023-24, just for our LIHTC application round. Now I want to take us through the resources that the URA currently has available towards funding affordable housing for the city of Pittsburgh. One source is the Housing Opportunity Fund, which is the city's Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Thank you to the city of Pittsburgh for legislating this trust fund so that the URA can receive $10 million per year. We've been receiving this since 2018 towards affordable housing programming. These funds are currently split between 8 different programs that support affordable housing projects, as well as the needs of our low to median income residents in the city of Pittsburgh. In 2024, in the 2024 allocation for the Housing Opportunity Fund, there's $2 million available for rental gap program and $650,000 available for the for sale development program, both which also can be funded through the affordable housing bond. And then if we move on to our capital budget allocation, a large portion of the city's, the capital budget to the URA went towards choice neighborhoods communities. And so what we are left with for our housing development is $320,000 towards affordable for sale development and $2.8 million towards affordable rental development, which could go towards our rental gap housing preservation or downtown conversion programs. The combination of the HOF and the 2024 capital budget allocation yields approximately $4.8 million to the URA in 2024, which would help us fund approximately 4 development projects, 4 of the LIHTC or downtown or housing preservation projects in the pipeline currently, and $970,000 in for sale development funds, which would allow us to fund approximately 9 projects. So without the bond funds, the URA would not be able to meet the demand for resources on to the deals that are currently in our pipeline. And so for our next step, I'd like to get into the details of the spending plan for discussion today. So we, as Director Stanger mentioned, there's $30.6 million available to spend through the programs that we've talked about already. We, based on our stakeholder outreach and the projects currently in the pipeline, believe that the proposed allocation of funds will be similar to what's on the screen now. In our rental programs, which is the rental gap, housing preservation, and downtown conversion, we expect to use 50 to 80% of the fund there. That's due to the pipeline of projects that we have in the fund, as well as the cost of the projects and the availability to fundraise through those programs. For our for sale programs, we expect to spend approximately 10 to 15% of the fund, or $3 million to $4.5 million, towards that for sale program. Our new construction bridge loan program, we're expecting 15 to 30% of the fund to go towards that, $4.5 million to $9 million there. And again, this is based on stakeholder outreach, and the pipeline of projects currently available. And just to kind of dig into the details of these programs and why we've split the fund out the way that we have a little further, one thing we heard from council very loud and clear when we were here attempting to fundraise for this bond is that you all want the fund to revolve and you want the money to be able to be spent into the future. It's not just a one-time thing. And we heard you loud and clear, and we had to think through ways to make that happen through our programming. And so what we've considered here is that our rental gap programs, where we'd be spending a good amount of the funds, are typically a cash flow loan or a deferred loan to the developer. We have to have this structure for the developer because affordable housing does not throw off enough cash flow to be able to pay off a lot of debt. And so what we do is we provide very patient capital so that their projects can continue to cash flow and not be underwater. So we have that. We have the rental gap programs will be cash flow or deferred loans. The for sale development program, we are going to consider this as a line of credit to our nonprofit partners and developers so that they can purchase properties and have a source of funds that they can use quickly to acquire and to complete projects as needed. This would have a small interest rate, and it will be similar to other pre-development loans available to nonprofits. Our new program is where I think we will see some cash flow coming back to the URA. It will be an amortizing loan, and we are going to consider using it as a construction or bridge loan, and that we feel like construction financing will churn within 2 to 3 years, and we should be able to get some return from that, add all of the return and the original amount back into the pot to be able to continue to use into the future. We will utilize, to approve all of the loans that we are proposing to use with the fund, we will utilize the URA's existing loan approval process, which is the applications will be received and underwritten by URA staff. We have a third-party real estate loan review committee made up of stakeholders, funders, affordable housing finance experts, and others who will review the projects once they're ready, once the underwriting is complete, and make a recommendation to approve or disapprove to the URA's Board of Directors. Our Board of Directors will consider that recommendation and make final approvals, and then the projects, the funds are committed, and the project will move towards a closing. So some of our targets that we are proposing to meet with the bond funds are, there's many targets, and we want to walk through those now. The first is our unit production. We're anticipating the bond funds will help create or preserve approximately 1,000 rental or for sale housing units in the first 3 years of the fund. We also are targeting specific AMI limits. 50% of the fund should be used towards families and individuals at or below 30% of area median income, which is extremely affordable or low income. 25% of the fund should be used towards families and individuals at or below 50% of AMI. At 50% AMI and below, a tenant is eligible for a housing choice voucher. So we could capture voucher tenants within 30 and 50% AMI level. And then 25% of the fund should be used towards families and individuals at or below 80% of AMI. And that is the AMI level that we currently use to target affordable home ownership. Our next bond target is our preferences and priorities. We are prioritizing many things, including long-term affordability of 40 years or more, and we are giving a preference to projects that will create permanent affordability options. We'll prioritize projects that have creative home ownership models, including limited equity cooperatives. There's a lot of buzz in the city around creating new home ownership models, and we are happy to support that. Our programs currently support that, and we will use the bond funds to support that as well. We also want to prioritize large family-sized units with 3 bedrooms or more with this fund. And we'll prioritize projects that are using other public financing resources such as housing authority, tax credits, private debt, and also the housing choice voucher to help support the low-income renter on the back end. We have anti-displacement targets. We worked really closely with our stakeholders to come up with these targets. And those include no net loss of affordability at a project site. All affordable units should be maintained or replaced in locations that are no less desirable than the original location. And replacement housing should be built first or phased so that residents only need to move once. Also, working very closely with stakeholders, have developed design targets that the bond will be targeting. All new construction and projects of 4 units or more receiving an investment of the funds shall target to meet the following. A minimum of 10% of the units shall be accessible to individuals with mobility impairments and 4% accessible to individuals with sensory impairments. All units shall meet visitability standards, and all projects shall maximize the number of units that meet universal design standards. So we feel like with those robust targets, we will help the city meet a lot of its goals that it has towards affordable housing through this fund. So our immediate and future next steps as in spending the fund and putting the fund into action is in Q2 2024, last month, we delivered the first annual spending plan to City Council as part of the requirement of the fund. In Q3, we plan on taking many actions. One is to make any necessary amendments to the current program guidelines that we have per any discussion and feedback through our stakeholder engagement that we've had. We will launch those applications when those guideline changes are final, and we will also create a public notice of availability of funds so that the city and the developers and our partners know that these funds are truly available for use. In Q4 of 2024, we expect to create, create program guidelines for our new construction loan program. We expect to continue our stakeholder outreach as an ongoing effort to make sure these funds are meeting the needs of the community that we're serving. And then annually in the fourth quarter, of every year, we will be delivering an annual spending report. That may actually show up in Q1 of the following year. But we are prepared to deliver an annual spending report to City Council for the life of the bond. And that is our presentation for today. We again thank you to the city, to the members of City Council, to the Mayor's office and his administration for the support to the URA in this effort. And I will open up for discussion.
Thank you. I know Councilwoman Strasburger's time is limited, so I'll begin with her.
Thank you. And I want to thank you for this. This is very thorough and helpful to me, and I'm mostly looking forward to just hearing my colleagues' questions and comments, but I have one quick question, and that was about the new bridge loan tool. So, and I wasn't sure if the slide that goes on from that other slide, so the utilizing URA's existing loan approval process was meant for that particular tool, or that was just in general for loans? Okay.
Yeah, it's in general for all of them.
So my main question is for this new bridge loan, it's new construction only. So if it's not if you're taking an existing structure and converting or renovating, that would not?
No, we could use it for conversion, new construction, or preservation. So if there's
Okay.
a preservation project that needs to recapitalize and kind of do a full overhaul of the units, we can use it for that as well.
Okay. And is there a goal, a target, or a mandatory AMI attached to that?
We would
currently?
use that for an affordable deal, more than likely, or a deal that has affordable units in it. So it would kind of be a companion to a rental gap program, downtown conversion, or housing preservation program.
Okay. I mean, like, for instance, I'm just using this so I can try to get my head around it, because there are a lot of examples like this in the district I represent. Without there being a requirement, and recognizing that not a lot of the developers that I work with, despite urging them, pushing them to go for LIHTC, go for like deeply affordable units and tools for that, they say, well, what we're looking at is really 60 to 110% AMI, like in that range, and we will do whatever we can kind of get some gap funding for. In this particular development in Shady Side was looking to do 10 to 15% affordable in that range, and I think had a very helpful meeting with someone from the URI, I'm not exactly sure who, met with a local institution to see if there was like a workforce housing opportunity, like kind of, left no stone unturned in an effort to find that moderately affordable gap financing, and just couldn't find it. And then they're still pursuing it in a different way, but would that be an option for a loan for that type of project? For a construction of, I don't know, 200 units and a certain percentage affordable, or am I off base in thinking that would be appropriate?
I can start and then defer to others. I think as long as there is an affordability component that fits within our AMI target, we would be able to consider it. The amount that would be needed there, like the amount that we could provide, we'd have to take into consideration, because we don't want to tie up the whole fund on one project. We want to have it available for many. So I think we could consider it, but we would just have to consider how much we could provide in that scenario.
Because her comment was well taken. On the one hand, and I can see both sides of it. On the one hand, they said, when we do business in Chicago or I don't know other cities, there are just a whole range of options for all sorts of affordability targets. In Pittsburgh, rightfully so, we are targeting 50% and below AMI, because that is what the data shows that we need. So we're targeting that. There are just very few programs for those that are either going to do 60% or 80%, or if they can't find the financing for that, nothing at all, right? So I'm always trying to find what is the tool that we have that for a future development like that would allow for that kind of prioritization of that.
Our
level.
rental gap program, and I believe our housing preservation program can go up to 60%. That's the typical LIHTC kind of percentages we can do. We can go up to 60. So we would be able to use these programs for the 60% units and below. And then for the for sale, that's where we go up to the 80%.
Okay. And more so, I was just trying to get a handle on this new tool that you're proposing. So that was a helpful illustration for that. Thank you. I have no further questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Other members?
I just had a couple questions for now. Some more questions may come up. My first question, kind of more of a 30,000-foot question. Is there a sense of like a ballpark figure of how many affordable units will be, developed over the entire time horizon of the bond?
Our rough estimate is approximately 1,000 units
Okay.
with the 30 million.
Okay.
That's a conservative approach.
Sure.
So
That's over the first 3 years.
Okay.
We didn't necessarily estimate out the whole life of the bond, but
Right. Okay.
I think it's fair to say once we get through the first 3 years and we see what performance looks like, we may be able to put together a better projection for you. But we got to get through the first 3 years, see what performance looks like, and then maybe sort of project out.
So 1,000 over the first 3 years. Thank you for that. And then also, I know like a lot of the analysis came from the 2016 report, and 2022 report. I know the 2016 report talked about a 17,000 unit gap. Obviously that was 8 years ago. Do we have a sense of where the numbers are at now? My general spidey sense tells me that the problem has probably gotten worse since then. But is there a sense of what those numbers look like in 2024 versus 2016?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact figures off the top of my head, Councilman, but there was an update to the housing needs assessment that was published last year. The data is from 2020, 2021. So, even from then to now, it's a bit stale. The one thing that I will say was surprising is the number actually went down.
It was calculated wrong.
Yeah, the number actually went down, but it was a function of, yes, some unit production as a result of the Housing Opportunity Fund, but then also families leaving the city, and that is some of what it belies. I agree, Councilman, that there's some noise in the data, and even within the report, there's some different numbers across it. So I'm not saying in absolute terms what the figure is, right? But some of that dynamic is through the data verifiable that we lost low-income families from the city, and in particular Black low-income families from the city, which led to sort of the need going down because those families no longer live in the city.
Thank you for that. And my last question for this round is, given that 50% of the bond targets are at 30%, and 75% are at 50% down to 30%. What particular coordination, if any, is happening? With the housing authority, being that obviously, they a big part of their work is housing folks, in that same aspect. So if anyone can talk about, the coordination that's happening, being that clearly there's a intersection, of interest and services provided there.
I can start. So for the low-income housing tax credit deals, there's typically organization or coordination with the housing authority on the developer's behalf, and they typically are going to the housing authority for their gap financing as well. So they have a tool where they provide gap financing as well as vouchers. I think it's $100,000 in gap financing per voucher that a developer requests. And so for the low-income housing tax credit deals, no issue with coordination with the housing authority. We at the URA are working hard to coordinate all of our other projects with the housing authority, including the downtown conversion projects, where there is some affordability required in those as well. So we are coordinated with them, and connecting the developer to them, because that's where the true coordination needs to happen.
And actually, I said I'm pulling Councilman Charlin right now, but I do have one last question that kind of came up in the process of you answering the question. And one thing that I've noticed, in my district, with some of the proposed development, projects that me and Director Chitinopoli have talked about, a lot, is, we know that, from a public standpoint, they share the concern that we share around this table about the importance, of affordable housing. And when, new developments come up, that's generally one of the first questions, is how much affordability. And, many, market rate developers that, generally in the past haven't had, a lot of history, having to, crunch those numbers in a way and think about, affordability, when they're, doing developments. When I'm at the table with them, I definitely, sense the heartburn and the anxiety when we start talking about, project, based vouchers. Is it possible, for us to work together and do more education, with developers? Because I feel as though, just given, the zeitgeist of the moment among the populace, of the city, among as, many advocates as well as my colleagues, around the table, know that, when, these developments, come online, there's an expectation in the people that we represent that there's a level of affordability that I think many of the, the market rate developers aren't used to. And I think it's, incumbent and I think, imperative to ensure that their deals pencil out, but then also that we're continuing to develop the amount of affordable housing that we need. That's clearly, in the analysis that you've done, so just some thoughts about how, we can do that kind of ongoing, kind of continuing education process, with our developers so they can get more confidence and really understand, how that works so that we, the deals can still pencil out, but then we're still, not only creating, more housing, we know we need more production, but also, production in the areas where the most acute need is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think, when we have conversations with folks about projects and I know other folks at the table have thoughts and opinions on this, when we have the discussions with them, most of the time it is just a lack of understanding and familiarity with the tool. And that's solvable, right? Whether it's through sort of regular education or working it project by project. I would say to, the team, at this table's credit and the developers, credit, a good example of this is the Triangle Building project that was the first, downtown conversion that we moved forward, where, they initially came in with, I can't, it's a smaller project, right? It's only 15 units. It initially had, 3 affordable units. They were having troubles getting, to final closing, with everything on theirs. And, we increased our loan to that, as well as they are doing project-based vouchers with the housing authorities, as part of that deal too. And, they came into it, and every project up to that point, 100% market rate. And, I think once our team was able to demystify those tools a bit for them, there were, some changes that even, we ultimately made in our program guidelines as well, in order to sort of balance that and then, advance that project forward. But I really, and we said it at the board meeting when we voted on it last month, appreciated their willingness to come to the table as a partner and, work that problem, and find something that's mutually beneficial for everyone. So, but I know, like I said, Kiana, and Sushila have, certainly, and Ben have thoughts on this. David too, probably.
Yeah, I would just add that we are working with developers on a deal by deal basis, but we're also putting our heads together to strategize about an educational training. And one of the things that we're advancing is putting together a pro forma that allows developers to plug and chug. So an actual pro forma model that shows, okay, this is how many units you have, these are the AMI levels that you would seek to achieve, and the number of units, what the funding gap would become, and then at the very bottom, how to fill that gap with the various tools that we have available to us: housing bond, HOF, working with housing authority, et cetera. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I blurted out there is because I really feel passionate about context. And when I had the meeting with the director Abrams at the time about the new housing needs assessment, they literally started off with the first slide talking about how the company that was hired previously calculated it wrong. And the number was extremely lower than what was. Yeah. I think the number was like 20K they were throwing around.
Oh, really?
Initially, yeah.
Okay.
And then that's down to, not down, but it was, if they calculated it correctly at the time, it would have been like 13,000 or something. Can you, like,
That's,
and
I don't
it
remember
really
the,
didn't move.
yeah, I don't remember the exact figures at one point in the report it says, just a few thousand, right? That it had decreased that much.
But let's frame it. What are we talking about?
And
A few
then
thousand of what?
The gap of available and affordable units to households at 50% of AMI or below.
Mm-hmm.
So at one point in the report, it says that amount, and then somewhere else later, it has a different number, which is like 11,000. So to your point, I understand that. That's why I said I don't think it's in absolute terms. And if you really dig into, and I don't know that we want to do this now, but like dig into the methodology on those numbers, it's really meant to be more sort of a signal of need, right, or the magnitude of need than it is like literal, right? Like if we came out of the gate and built those number of units, it doesn't necessarily, mean that that's going to quote solve it, but it gives us an idea of where we need to go to, right? So that's an important kind of distinction I would make. So it went down, right?
So the target didn't
and
change.
The reasons for it coming down are, whether it went down to, the number at the beginning of the report or the number sort of that's cited at the end of the report, whatever the amount was, I think the drivers are sort of the same, right?
Still recognize a problem, but like close to 10,000 difference was a pretty big.
Sure. Yeah.
And we're talking half of what was reported, I don't know, before I was here. I just thought that was glaring. And I did want further calculations on just how it's calculated. I never got that. It wasn't your responsibility. It was city planning's. And I believe I followed up one time and then I just gave up because I wanted to dig into a little more on how that's calculated. Like what's the process, the method that they go to do that.
Yeah.
They kept pointing back to like, well, we hired someone that did that. And it's like, well, I'd like to know how we did that because we're also, going down the road of doing this comprehensive plan, and hopefully that's not still the answer from city planning. That you have to talk to the person that we hired.
I'm happy to follow up, Councilman, on
Okay.
offline. There's like an established methodology that the National Low Income Housing Coalition uses. That was the methodology I know that we used back in 2016. I wasn't here when when the newer report was done, produced. I was here when it was finished. So I wasn't involved in the calculations other than noting the discrepancy that you said.
So whether it's 20,000 or 11,000, the goal still is the same goal, which still can't get to 11,000. We're saying around 1,000 units. We think we can help
Approximately.
with the 30 million.
Approximately.
And does that equal the 40 years you're saying? Like those 1,000 could still be affordable for 40 years?
That's what we're planning for.
Okay, that's what I was hearing.
Yeah.
So each of that equals out to like 30,000 a unit, roughly, just like we're all estimating. And so, walk me through that. Let's just pick out the biggest one, which is the rental gap program. Could you help me understand that more clearly? So, you're a family of 3 living in Oakland currently, and we can pick my district since you're living on the north side currently, and what this program could help you because, like, say they're living at 50% AMI, like we're.
So if you are a family of 3 and you're living at home with your mother because you can't find a unit, this program is going to help more units be created. So this isn't going directly to individuals. This money will be used towards
So you work with the developer.
Correct. We'll
And
work
then-
with developers. The URA funding is always gap financing. We never fund 100% of a project. And so the amount of money that the developer has to leverage to receive our funds is great. And we're proud of the fact that, in a $20 million project, we maybe only have given $1.5 million, but we're still able to secure those affordable housing units in that development for a long period of time.
Could you walk me through that? So 50% AMI, someone's going to go into a new development, or
So a developer could choose to, in a building that they already own, they could choose to renovate it and come to us for gap financing.
And can you explain gap? Because 50% AMI, for a long time, we've been talking about that, for instance, the LERTA bill, that there will be vouchers available. So we
Correct.
already talking that the vouchers available at the site?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. when a developer is creating the project or figuring out their capital stack, they are also determining what levels of area median income they would like to support with those units. And so when they come to us, we say, fine, you are meeting our goals and requirements for the program. We'll give you the funds. And then when the project is completed, if there are vouchers at the project, the Housing Authority will help to find tenants for those voucher units. And the units that are low income that don't have vouchers, the developer will go through their own process to find low income tenants for those units as well.
Can you explain that part? So the people who wouldn't be eligible for a voucher, is that what you're saying?
50% and below. If anyone in the city of Pittsburgh who is below 50% AMI, at 50% AMI or below, could be eligible for a housing choice voucher through the Housing Authority.
What's the range you're talking about? If the developer, if they don't qualify for that, what's the ranges?
A tax credit deal can go up to 60% for rental. And so if there are any, in a tax credit deal, if there are 60% units, they would have to go through a different process to secure that tenant that the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency approves. So there's some range of affordability there, but 50% AMI and below, you could get a voucher tenant.
So what's the gap we're filling up to the market price?
So when we say this money is used to fill the gap, we're saying fill the gap for project construction costs. We're not necessarily filling a gap on the operations side of the pro forma. That's where the housing choice voucher comes in when, a person should not be paying more than 30% of their gross income towards their housing expenses. And so when they go for this housing choice voucher through the Housing Authority, the Housing Authority will determine how much money based on that individual's income they can spend towards rent. And then depending on where the project is located within the Housing Authority's tiered system that they use throughout the city, there's a maximum amount of rent that they could apply to those voucher units for, so the gap on the tenant side is really going to be filled through like tax credit unit rent or housing choice voucher rents. But we are funding with the bond gaps in construction costs.
Yeah. So if the voucher doesn't cover the cost, fully cover the cost, because there's a limit up to, right? There's a limit. I don't know what the limit is. 2,100.
There's a limit on how much a voucher will pay for based on household size. Yeah.
Right.
So and the location.
All those go into that. So if it goes above that, the developers or the owner is they're gonna take care of that cost.
Well, somewhat, I mean, there is a relationship, right, between the development budget or the construction costs, as Kiana said it, and the operating budget, right? And this may be where you're getting to in terms of how much debt a project's able to support, right? And then the relationship between the debt they need to cover, their return to their investors, and the rents they charge. That, will lead to a certain amount of debt they can raise, a certain amount of equity they can raise. If they can't raise all of that sufficiently, that leads to a project gap. There's gaps caused by that relationship that I just said, or also by appraisals, right? Which can also lead to that. So that's where then the discussion around the capital comes in, or the construction gap, as Kiana described it, where, we can make.
Yeah, no, I get it. I was just trying to understand if,
that.
do we already know scenarios where there will be a gap in the, between the voucher price and the market rate?
I think what we've been encouraging our development partners to do in these scenarios to help kind of determine this is to go work directly with the Housing Authority, and we can kind of help coordinate that. We do not, the vouchers do not come from the Redevelopment Authority. I don't want to speak to the details of how, those things can be worked out, so.
I get it.
Yeah.
So, all right. So these 40-year agreements, right? That's what we're looking to do. 40-year agreements,
Correct.
and that would be between the URA and the developer.
Yes.
And how many of those deals have we already done? Not with the bond, but just previous work.
Councilman, I'd have to go back and look and see. I can say that I believe we bumped up our affordability target to 40 years around 2019 when PHFA also made the change from 30 years to 40 years. So I'd have to go back and see how many of these deals we've done since that change in 2019.
Can you just point to a project?
Yeah, we went through the 2022 LIHTC round on the previous slide. So if you look at the 2022 LIHTCs, any of those projects that have closed, I'll point to City's Edge, Bedford Dwellings, Oakland Pride. All of those are coming with 40-year commitments.
Okay, and that's with a LIHTC.
Because those are LIHTCs,
Have we ever done
yeah.
one? Have we ever done one outside of a LIHTC? Like that didn't get a LIHTC deal?
I see
Yeah.
Ben coming on.
Because I mean, there's what 5 LIHTCs we get a year.
Roughly.
So
I guess my point is, I'm trying to get to the point of like trying to understand how long it will take us to spend the 30 million.
I
Well,
think our anticipation to the, target numbers,
2-3 years?
is within 3 years we will have spent, done the initial spend down of all 30 million.
So we expect people to renovate or build new, and us sign a contract for 40 years within the biggest target here of the rental gap program.
Yes.
Okay, so then, yeah, could you point to any projects currently that, because I imagine, I don't know, well, how much did you spend on one of those? How much will we plan to spend on a project? I guess they're all different. Could
Sure.
be
So
10 units, could be 30 units, could be 40 units.
Using rental gap, which
Yeah.
primary tool we've been discussing. Right now program guidelines cap out at the 1.25 million. As Kiana explained earlier, we've seen an increase since COVID in requests for waivers of guidelines to exceed that amount of funding due to cost increases. Also in the presentation, we've discussed that we want to go to our board and request guideline changes in the coming months to sort of reflect current status on the ground. So I think that it's fair to say in the coming months, we'll probably be proposing guideline amendments that increase that 1.25 per project cap to the board.
Okay. And there are projects outside of, a LIHTC that we've done with 40-year deals already? Or I know it's been updated since 2019, but since 2019 to...
For sure, yeah. And we can get you the data on that. I mean, we can pull
that'd be
the
interesting.
number of projects that
Yeah.
have a 40-year deed
Okay.
restriction or higher. Because there are we're talking about our rental gap program, but there are plenty of other programs or deals where the affordability period it goes beyond 40 years.
Right. Okay, well, I have... Oh, sorry. Did you want to say something?
No.
Like,
I
go
don't have
say it.
anything
You
to
might
add.
as well say it. It's going to be your only opportunity.
Yeah, right.
Go ahead.
You nailed it. For an example here would be the Housing Preservation Program, right? So that was a new program stood up last year. We've done 11 projects through there. I would say at least 9 of them are not LIHTC related. So these are developers who are looking to recapitalize projects that need significant rehab. And in those instances, we enter into a loan with them. And just to clarify, we do a deed of restriction that we file that stays with the property for 40 years, tying those units up for at different affordability levels. So the owner can change and leave, but the affordability of the units have to stay that
I
way,
gotcha.
regardless of who owns the land.
I think, and Ben can add to this, but an important part of that too is I know with at least a couple of the projects, they had been unrestricted, naturally occurring affordable housing, which then, the team, made loans to them and brought them to the board, which we approved, that then placed these deed restrictions on them. So they were ones that, were just naturally occurring affordable. And to your question, Councilman, no LIHTC, financing within it. And due to our investment, is now deed restricted and protected for at least 40 years.
Yeah, it's helpful. So I have one more question. It's the first time I said it. So I'm going to follow through on that. So earlier today, we took a committee vote, preliminary vote on the LRTA for downtown, and wanted to know how you all, I see conversion throughout here. Just want to know how you all see this funding becoming another tool in addition to the tax abatement program. And that will be my final question.
Okay. Unless you think of a follow-up during.
I'll say a comment. I'll say a comment.
So I'll start and I'll let the rest of the team add into this. I think we stood up the pilot program for the downtown conversion, and committed the bulk of the remaining of our funds last month at the board meeting. We view this, as another way to help as these projects come up and become ripe. And we are also continuing to fundraise, at the state and federal levels, in other ways to bring more resources to bear. The $6 million, thank you to the state and thank you to council and for giving us those resources, and the URA for repurposing some of our existing. We know there is, and they can speak to the specifics, adequate deals in the pipeline right now. And then based on, studies that have been done on properties that are good candidates for conversion, another 30 plus properties that, could be targeted for conversion as well. Which I know you've all had robust conversations about, so I won't sort of rehash all of it in terms of the importance of it. But, that as a means for being gap funding, the bond is a potential to help us recapitalize that is certainly there. I think it's more going to be a function of as the deals become ripe, right? Hopefully we have more resources and, we can use these in other ways. But that's certainly why, it's being presented as an option for the spending plan right now.
I just didn't know what you meant by, what do you say, as these become, it seemed like you were saying that this could be, we could use the funds if other money becomes available.
We're continuing to fundraise, right? Like to get more monies specifically around downtown conversions. Downtown conversion, though, is one potential use of many, right? That we're proposing here in the spending, or the team's proposing here in the spending plan. That's all I meant by that. So as individual projects become ripe, we'll move them through. But
But you see it as everything that was put into the LRTA program. There's definitely multiple avenues where it could become very helpful. So looking forward to that. And with that, I appreciate you all coming here and presenting all this information. And I look forward to supporting it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gross. And I was trying to think of projects. I think Crawford Square, was only extended 30 years, if my memory serves me correctly. Crawford Square was refinanced 2016, 17, somewhere around there. But I'm not sure if it was for the full 40 years, but I know it was at least 30. I was just trying to think of projects, but Councilwoman Gross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. I was here for the other discussions by the other members, so I'm not going to kind of rehash. But I have in front of me the text file of the final covenants that we put on the commitment for the $62.5 million bonds, which we tussled over at council for sure. And I think, as you said in your presentation, that I see many places where your bond allocation plan is consistent with what some of them are more required, and some of them were more suggestive, and we did tussle over that because I was going to try to make them all binding conditions, but we compromised, as we often do here at the table. I see things like we requested that the minimum amount of those deed restrictions be 40 years, and that is what you're promising here. That there be a funding for both new construction, but also the preservation of existing deed restriction housing and naturally occurring housing, which is the part of the conversation I think that was just talked about. Of course, you've been compliant with the 90 days report, and we are looking forward to talking about an annual performance report, and that we had hoped that the kind of households served and the amount of funds would, again, preserve existing deed restricted affordable housing, naturally occurring affordable housing, creating new housing with deed restrictions of at least 40 years. Also, council suggested, and I was a proponent when we were first contemplating the allocation to the URA of $62.5 million, of utilizing some of the funds through a revolving loan program. And that was from my notes from those discussions, was made more easy by it being not a municipal bond. Did I say that right? I think there was some deep discussions. This is kind of just rehashing here, that because it was a taxable bond and not a non-taxable, tax-exempt municipal bond, that it made it legally more easy to do a revolving loan fund. I'm just a big fan of revolving loan funds. I've tried to do our child care appropriations that we fought for $2 million years ago as a revolving loan fund. That didn't work out. I've got a background working with CDFIs, and I'm a big fan of making the money work 2, 3, 4 times instead of just once. So this is a very minutia. This is minutia here, but if anyone can speak to it.
I don't think the taxable versus tax exempt is what makes the revolving possible or not possible, but I think it is fair to say that by going taxable, we are accessing a broad flexibility in use of funds that makes it easier to think through pretty much all of what we're doing here, including the revolving fund, because if you had gone tax exempt, you'd need to know the specific
project ahead of
projects
time,
and
the line items.
They'd all have to
basically
be ready to go. You'd have to know how they'd turn. So it's not an exact one-for-one type requirement, but certainly the increased flexibility allows us to think more creatively about the entire spending plan.
And that is an important point. So I said that was the one thing that makes it a little more palatable, that we're paying basically $2 for every dollar that you're talking about. So I'm kind of giving the concession ahead of time, that at least some portion of these funds will not just work once, but twice, 3, maybe 4 times. Does make that $2 for every dollar ratio come down a little bit, right? If you're using that dollar over and over and over again, because we are paying 2 to 1. So I can't help but look at this and for the presentation to say, $30 million investments will result in $1,000 a unit. It's a $30 million investment for you all, but it's a $62.5 million investment for our tax dollars. So, that doubles the amount, except for the fact that some of those funds do revolve. And then similarly, I think I saw, but I'm asking for you to help me, because I've got multiple documents in front of me. The spending plan, I think, is from the website, but then there's my colored printout here is from the slide deck. We also talked explicitly about wanting, and an earlier draft that did not make the cut for the actual legislation that we voted on, named specifically the kind of social housing or limited equity housing clubs that you spoke about. So was it in the slide deck? Did you, I've lost my place here. And by the way, while I was taking photos, I was sending it to Councilwoman Warwick. So if anybody out there at the URA has the actual slide deck in an email, we didn't get it in our inbox. And so if any council members are remote.
Has it too, right?
Yeah, we can send out the slide deck for sure.
Yeah.
The report was circulated, the 90-day report, which is the black and white document.
But just
this
today's
is the presentation,
slide deck,
and we're happy to circulate that. Councilmember Gross on slide 26, I believe, is where we're talking about prioritization of creative home ownership models, including limited equity co-ops.
Thank you.
In the
go.
preferences and priorities section.
Okay. So it's at like on my printed thing, it's bottom of page 13 is slide 26.
That's correct.
I'm still like kind of not seeing it.
It is under the arrow that points to your right, the second.
Okay,
Essentially
prioritization.
point.
Okay,
Yep.
so yeah, this is one little bullet point on slide 26, but it is there. Prioritization will also be given to creative home ownership models, including limited equity housing co-ops, which is fantastic. I think the last time we discussed this, it was kind of like, well, people aren't asking us for those, but now you are seeing people asking you for those. And I also want to say for the record that in 2022, Councilwoman Smith and I passed the resolution supported by all council members to kind of request the administration and city departments to look into limited equity housing co-ops. And the URA was the only city department that actually completed their section of the report. I think I've said it once on the record. I'll say it again. I have the email from September 1st, 2022, where you actually completed your part of the report. I nagged our candidate for city planning about it yesterday. So I appreciate that. And so this also, is it all parts of the POTS, or is it just one of the programs?
So, sorry, in terms of what could be used?
Yes.
I think it'll depend on the project as it comes in for us, right? Like, it is more of a for sale product. In terms of the development of it. We spoke a little bit about this yesterday. So I think as the community groups who've reached out to us with interest in pursuing limited equity co-op projects, what we've encouraged them to do and had discussions about some of the technical aspects, but more so, is to target a project that they want to bring forth like as a demonstration project. And then, I'm using we in the broadest sense. It's really Kiana and Ben and the team, have committed to sort of working with them on, developing that as they go forward, and encourage them to apply to the HOF for some demonstration dollars, to help get that work started. So I believe our last conversation with them was about a month ago. And, they did ask for a follow-up after they've had a chance, to do a little bit more outreach. Because as we discussed yesterday, in a lot of ways, being able to successfully advance a limited equity co-op project is really an exercise in community organizing. And then, I don't want to say the development, part of the capital stack part is going to be easy. But, once those folks are aligned and we have a direction on the kind of structure that they want to go forth, then we can start to work the problem, if you will.
But any kind of these conversion projects could also be a conversion to
Conceivably,
limited equity housing co-op, right?
Yeah.
So if you're creating new units that were not residential, there's not tenants already in the units, right? I'm all in favor of tenants organizing and, taking control of the properties, but that's not the only way to achieve it, right? And so in other kinds of situations where you're, if you're doing any of these office to housing conversions, you could take the LRTA to do a hotel, but it'd be better if you took the LRTA to do a limited equity housing co-op, in my opinion. And that the downtown conversion program dollars here similarly, right? So any one of these buildings could be converted to actually, would be, I think, a nice circularity, because our first LRTAs were really about downtown conversions, condos. They were for sale, LRTAs, right? Under the Mayor Murphy Live, Work, Play, right? Those were not affordable. They weren't low barrier to entry, And so again, the reminder is that I think Dr. Bay, our candidate for city planning director, is, reminded us yesterday to ask ourselves, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And we said later word after camera that if we acknowledge that too much of our for sale property is out of reach for our residents, and that we have home ownership really decreasing in the city and even more steeply decreasing in minority communities, that this is one of the solutions. And so why do this thing? Because we identify, that the supply of housing is getting gobbled up by Airbnbs, it's getting gobbled up by private equity companies, or is just skyrocketing in price to be unattainable to people, especially who maybe they've started families and are fully employed, but they're burdened by student loan debt. And so there's just no way they're going to be able to achieve those high down payments. And so certainly not on the salaries that for a lot of the city staff that we're paying, right? If they weren't lucky enough to already own a home, they really struggle. And I think Councilman Charlene was just speaking to this today at Standing Committee. So this is a problem that is a tool for us for that problem. So if we are encouraging and soliciting projects that are achievable, and again, a reminder, if people are chiming in to hear about the housing bond, in a limited equity housing co-op situation, normally there is just not a high down payment, right? Your payments are your payments towards your ownership shares. And so it's a much lower barrier to entry. It's also a housing form that we've been doing here for over 100 years. Councilman Mosley has one in his district that still operates. And so you have housing stability and you're growing equity and wealth building, but in a just way easier front door for you as an individual. So I love that. I do want to clarify before I'm done, some of the total dollars, and again, I'm kind of just losing my place. There was a slide that said our other affordable housing dollars, and I think it had the HOF dollars. But does that slide combining both HOF and ARPA? Because when it says AAP, does that just mean annual allocation? And so that's just HOF dollars on that chart?
Correct. That
Okay.
chart only shows HOF, the $10 million of HOF, and the allocation years from 2018 through 2024.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so the total, including this year, is basically 72 million. And then we also did ARPA funds, and I'm going to admit I always get them a little flip-flopped. It was something like, I can keep like 80 million in my head, and it was $30 million for small business and 50 for housing, or vice versa, something like that.
The URA in the ARPA allocation has been appropriated by council roughly $70 million total, and I would say rough math, about 35 to 40 of that is for housing.
Okay. Even if I put 35, right? And so we're already up to 117 or so. And then again, I know it's 30 million for you all in the spending, but it's $62.5 million for us for allocating. So, I mean, we're over 150 million, right? Which is kind of what I was saying when we were discussing the allocation here for these commitments. And I know you've reported on it, and your reports are getting better and better every year. They really are. There's a lot more detail for the public. It's available on the URA website. There's a lot of quantification of kind of who's been supported, how many people are being newly housed, how many have retained housing. I can't spit them out off the top of my head. But it's a heavy lift. It's a heavy lift for us, right? And so this is why we're looking for partners either at the Housing Authority with using voucher money for actual development, construction development funds, looking for county coordination on who's doing what with housing and where the different pots of money and how much we can draw down and utilize. And what else? I mean, I don't know what else. Is the state going to loosen up more LIHTC, or what's going to happen? Does anybody know? Everybody's kind of chuckling. The camera's on me, but everybody at the table is just kind of like, "Rrr."
Yeah, at PHFA we expect we'll make LIHTC awards in the next couple of months. We're hopeful to receive anywhere between 4 and 6 awards if you look at the past 5-6 years of what the city of Pittsburgh has received. I think there's a real opportunity for both PHFA and the city of Pittsburgh. This has been identified publicly since the initial Housing Opportunity Fund report in 2016 that, as Kiana mentioned earlier, 4% are not currently competitive. So if you can get through the underwriting process, it's a significant amount, not as much as the 9%, but significant amount of funding available.
Do we see those? Are we seeing? I feel like it's been about 10 years for rooms again. People just don't do them.
I would say we're seeing some. We could see more. And I think that, to your point, the city has been appropriating more and more funds towards housing affordability, and that provides us then the opportunity to go after and be more opportunistic with things like the 4%. They also allow us to take advantage of similar actions that the state is taking. For example, we discussed the performance of the $8.9 million in ARPA that we have for housing preservation. This is 11 projects, nearly 700 units of preserved housing. Most of those projects are possible because the state and PHFA have also stood up a preservation program with their ARPA funding. So I think that in the same way that the city is, through the housing bond and other mechanisms like the Housing Opportunity Fund, committed to continuing to work on this, to Councilman Wilson's point, to continue to address our sort of unit gap in the city. We need to see the state and we need to see the federal government matching that energy and that commitment of resources beyond the expiration of ARPA, for sure.
Anybody else?
Just want to go back to the Housing Opportunity Fund comment. You mentioned that we received approximately $72 million in HOF funds since 2018. I just want to make sure it's clear to the public that the majority of those funds through the Housing Opportunity Fund have gone to programs that are assisting individuals specifically. So 39 million of that 71 million is going directly to individuals, either through our homeowner assistance program, down payment closing costs to help folks buy homes, so our housing stabilization program, which helps keep people in their homes, small landlord, legal assistance. So there's many programs through the HOF, but the majority of those funds are going towards individuals and not necessarily towards projects.
I'm glad you brought that up. It's important for us to keep in front of us at the table, and I think several council members mentioned it already, that when we don't keep people housed, they leave the city, right? Because there's no apartment next door that they can rent. And so we talked about the population laws. We talked about minority population laws. This is kind of a theme we've been talking about in the last couple of interviews. And that's where we're losing population, because the housing is too expensive. And we just need to keep repeating that, because that wasn't not why we've lost populations for 40 years. It was because jobs left, right? Steel mills left, and then more jobs left, and then more corporate headquarters left, et cetera, et cetera. But if we don't have that rental assistance, not the rental gap assistance, but the actual helping people pay their rent, helping people avoid being evicted, helping people, stabilizing the currently affordable housing, but mostly that assistance, buying their own house, and hopefully buying a limited equity housing co-op, that they'll leave. They go to Shaler, they go to Penn Hills, they go to Dormont, or they go to McKees Rocks, and wherever they can find housing. And we know that to be true. And it's just a variation of what you were saying earlier, Director, that we know that because of the difference in the numbers in the housing reports, is that because we've already lost those people.
I would agree with what you just said, but to your earlier question, Councilwoman, to build off what David and Kiana said as well, I think an important point you weren't here at the beginning when Council President Lavelle noted that we recently just had our 100th closing. The team just had the 100th
I saw
closing.
the press release.
Yeah, for Own PGH, and I think that is an important point, right? One, because it's 100 homeowners, many of them new, first-time homeowners, many of them minority-headed households, in the city of Pittsburgh. And to David's comment on the ARPA monies and the split between how much is going to housing, versus other uses, the majority of the money going to housing is for owner-occupied for sale housing, right? Which is also part of the reason of the focus, and here sort of on the other end, of the housing needs. So, the team has taken a balanced approach, I would contend, in the way of thinking of these things kind of collectively and in complement to one another, to advance those things. We've also, been fortunate through creativity, both of community partners as well as some of our colleagues who aren't with us today, in thinking through ways to leverage and utilize other tools that aren't traditionally used for housing, like new markets tax credits, and the deal that we recently closed through Pittsburgh Urban Initiatives with City of Bridges Land Trust, and that is the first fully affordable new markets tax credit deal for housing that has happened in the city. And I believe it's going to end up delivering over 30, right? Close to 40 new homes. Again, that'll be new homeowners to the city.
So that was PIDC, New Market Tax Credits, and land.
Pittsburgh Urban Initiatives, yeah, PUI.
PUI, I always forget which ones are which.
Yeah, we can follow up with information on that too.
Thank you.
Yep.
If I'm not mistaken, that's like 2000s bond money.
It's new markets tax credits through PUI. I don't believe
Okay.
there's bond money through that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you didn't have any financing in it at all?
No, it's through the allocation from the U.S. Treasury to our CDE, which is the New Market Tax Credit entity.
We did provide some gap financing as well to help close the gap in the development costs.
From what source of funds?
I believe that
ARPA.
was the
Thank you.
CLT and ARPA. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, that is good news. I appreciate that. And they, just as a note, also the land trusts have 100-year or 99-year deed restrictions. But also pay their taxes, right? Because that's considered de facto for profit. So I think that kind of wraps up my questions. Again, I'm happy to see. I failed to mention the SROs. One of the covenants that we also put in, or strong suggestions, was to support new transitional housing in support of residents experiencing homelessness. I know that you're doing a $6.8 million from the home ARP, which is not through the bond, for a single room occupancy in the Hill District, which is great. And I assume that kind of deal would also be eligible here. That's what I'm saying, right? So I appreciate that as well. Okay, I think that's it for me, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I don't have any questions. Thank you all for your work. I do just want to, speaking to the loan, the bridge gap loan, is it also accurate when we're discussing it that it's really a tool that'll be very helpful for smaller developers as well as minority developers, because it'll help lessen the amount that they're going to have to go to actually finance to do some of these deals, which is harder for them to do, to go to a traditional bank and get the financing. I just want to make sure I'm accurate and also.
Yes, it's we haven't necessarily only targeted it to that group of development individuals or developers, but yes, absolutely, our folks who have some barriers to entry can definitely access that funding source to help kind of get their projects going and get their construction loan that they need to finish their project. So it can be anywhere from like a renovation of a for sale development program house, single family home, to supporting a LIHTC or a downtown conversion with a small assist to their construction financing that will give them a little break on their interest that they have to pay during that time. So, yep, we can, it's a spectrum of opportunity there.
Thank you. Councilwoman Warwick, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry I'm not in chambers today. Yeah, I just had not too many questions, just a few. One thing I was wondering is just, do we know, just for like the LIHTC awards that are listed, do we have a breakdown of, who are getting these units, whether it's seniors or whether it's family, the sort of, I mean, I know you may not have it with you here, but do we know the types of folks that are getting in these units? Are we able to see that?
Yeah, we can provide that information to you. Some of these projects are still under construction and not leased up yet. And so those numbers will be finalized with the lease up, but we can definitely provide information for the 2022 VITEC Awards to you when it's available.
Okay. And I know I saw some, I don't know if it was today or in one of the press releases, but there was something like that with the OPGH. I remember seeing some demographic numbers around the 100 OPGH. So that's good. I mean, I think that's important for us always to be seeing that, right? To making sure that we're, specifically making sure that we're covering the families, right? That is it's that while we are, providing housing for seniors and whatnot, which is of course very important, but that we're also really focusing on those families, right, with young kids, because that's what's going to keep Pittsburgh growing over the long term. I wanted to ask about the also just about, because we've talked a lot about that was actually back to own PGH. What is the outreach that you all do for this? Because it was funny. Councilman Charlotte mentioned earlier today, just sort of how hard it is to buy a home. So how is it that are you sending postcards out to all residents, or how is it that you're kind of letting people know that own PGH is out there?
That's a great question. Thank you. We haven't sent a postcard out to all residents. What we have been doing is holding office hours, which is where the URA goes into specific communities and goes through several sessions of presentations to talk through the process to go through the Own PGH program. So we've had several of those throughout the past year in many different communities. We can continue to have those as well. If any communities are interested, they can let us know. We also have partner banks that we work with through this program. And so with those partner banks, when they're receiving loan applications for someone who would fit into this program, they are sourcing them to us and through the program as well. And then just through our social media and other, outreach that the URA does continuously throughout the year, we always kind of market our programs that way and have opportunities for folks to reach out to us to provide them with additional information.
Okay. I mean, because I am kind of wondering, this is something sort of in all things, not just me, but something I've seen kind of overall, is like sort of trying to move beyond like the tabling of that, right? Like trying to get to the people where they are, even at the bank, which that's great, right? But that is already someone who's coming to the bank for a loan, right? So it's already someone who's thinking about buying a home. But I just feel like, there's probably a lot of people out there that just wouldn't even consider that they would be able to buy a home, but not realizing that, there could be like $70,000, $90,000 waiting for them, right, for their down payment. Is that right? Are those like rough numbers?
Those numbers are correct. We can provide up to $90,000 of assistance to a homeowner through Own PGH. And we also have a down payment and closing cost assistance program that can be stacked with that Own PGH program that provides an additional $7,500 of support as well.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it would be worth looking into, I don't know, like how much, maybe the radio stations would give you a break on like a spot, in the morning, in the morning programs or WESA or something like that. I don't know, just something to really get the word out there to people who might not otherwise think. Just really simple messaging that, that's pretty compelling, right? If you qualify, you could get up to $90,000 as a down payment on a home. I mean, that's a lot of money. That might help bring more people to the table, because that's a great program. The other thing I wanted to ask about is So I saw in 2024, 1.4 million in legal assistance. Is that like the mediation and legal representation for evictions? Is that what that is?
Yes, that's correct. We can also assist residents of the city of Pittsburgh with tangled title issues and provide legal support to getting their deeds and titles to their home remedied when there are situations where certain people are no longer, are potentially deceased or no longer living in the home and participating in that.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's fair. That's something that I mentioned this earlier today with members. I would love to see those mediation and legal assistance programs are wildly successful in keeping people in their homes, especially in cases of eviction. That's something I'm very interested in, Councilwoman Gross is being able to expand that so that we really can be providing that kind of assistance to keep people in the homes that they're already in citywide. So any way that we could, increase that spending. I know that there isn't always, it's hard to decide how much to put in what, but that's something that I want to be looking at in the next budget, 2025 budget conversations. And then the last thing is, so we've talked a lot about development projects, like big development projects, but I guess we're giving tax breaks to large developers who want to rehab their property downtown and all of this. I'm wondering also about our mom and pop landlords. There are a number, Pittsburgh has lots of landlords who have anywhere from 3 to maybe, 50, 60, 70 units. So, from very small to actually not that small, right? But they tend to be single family homes, right? Or duplexes or whatever. What are we doing to kind of encourage those folks who are often, a lot of the times they're Airbnb, they're moving over to other things than just general rental, sort of standard rental. What are we doing to help them and encourage them to get their properties in shape so that they can, and can start taking vouchers and really open up those single family units and rent to our 50% AMI and below, and kind of get those folks to diversify our neighborhoods a bit more?
That's a great question. We do, through the Housing Opportunity Fund, have our Small Landlord Fund, which is a program specifically for what you just mentioned. It's for someone who owns 10 or less rental units. So that's how we qualify a small landlord. We have a program where we can provide a very patient loan to that landlord so that they can update the property, make it more livable, a more comfortable home for the renter. And with this fund, we are requiring that they rent the property to an affordable renter. So we do have a program for that. We fund that program through the Housing Opportunity Fund. And we feel like now that we have the bond funds available to support more development activities, there could be an opportunity to move funds in the Housing Opportunity Fund allocation, and maybe in the next 3 years as we use the bond, to be able to spend a little bit more money in something like the small landlord program instead of using it in for sale development program, which potentially has other sources. So.
Yeah, because it looks like in 2024 there wasn't any spending in the small landlord fund. There was in the previous 2 years, about 400,000. Yeah, I mean, I think that as much as our large scale developers are important, and I know it's sometimes easier to work with them because we know who they are and it's like bigger projects. I feel like there is a lot of opportunity, and even with our large small landlords, right, where they do have these units, and a lot of them are like in really bad, and some of them, are some of our are not so great landlords, right? They've got a ton of units and they aren't necessarily in the best condition, and they're renting them to people for like not so, they're just kind of, everyone's just kind of agrees and I think it could help improve our neighborhoods overall if we could get those landlords involved in using these funds, and thus by using these funds, improving the houses that they're renting, and also improving. I think it would be good for everyone all around, the tenants, the landlords, the neighbors, all around. So that would be. I definitely would like to see more of that moving forward. I don't know how the outreach would work to folks like that. Maybe through the rental registry, that might be something that we could, sort of figuring out who those people actually are. Maybe once the rental registry is up and running, that'll be kind of a source for contacts in that realm.
Yeah, Council Member Warwick, this is David. Couldn't agree with you more on the points made. Just want to clarify the reason why the allocation plan for 2024 didn't include funding for the small landlord fund is because the prior year allocations had not been spent yet. And I want to just give a lot of credit to Kiana and the team and staff at the URA who have worked sort of endlessly on this program. I believe it was first introduced guidelines probably back in 2019, I want to say, at the URA board, and there's been continuous outreach to small landlords. There's been a slow trickle of projects, but not nearly as many as we'd like to see. And the team has just continually kept plugging away at this, engaging and trying to figure out ways to increase uptake on it, because we know, to your point, there's real value in getting this program to work. But that is the reason why there wasn't any additional funding in 2024 allocated.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, I understand. I mean, they definitely, I mean, just being in Greenfield, right? It's Greenfield and Hazelwood is very heavy with, these, and they can be they've lived in Pittsburgh forever. They know everything. They know how they like to do what they do, and they're not really interested in engaging with the city. But I think it's worth pursuing and keeping at it for sure, because I think there's a huge benefit, especially with that single family housing that they have that you're not going to get with a big development, right? That sort of, the nice, classic house that a family can have in a nice residential neighborhood.
Agreed. I think whether it's the, small landlord fund, or going back to the conversation we had with housing choice vouchers, new tools can be scary to folks that have not worked with them before, but they are tools that do work for those that have accessed it. It is, a proven solution across, many of these different options. So it's just a matter of continuing to plug away, highlight successes, and continue to encourage our, partners on the other side of the table to really come to us, work with us, and access the tools.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, yeah, I mean, free money. You gotta try to give people money. So, thank you so much. You guys are doing great work, and I look forward to seeing more as we go forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Second round, Councilman.
Yeah, I just had one question. Just
turn your mic on.
Step one. I just had a really quick question. I don't want to extend this very informative post agenda anymore, but we talked obviously a lot about new construction or even conversions, but I just want to wrap my head around a little bit about the naturally occurring affordable housing. Now, does this happen when somebody acquires an existing building, like a multifamily structure or something like that? Like how does the project work? Because I can wrap my head around, a developer either wants to convert a downtown building or build a new development. And so how does the program work for naturally occurring affordable housing in a building that already exists?
Thank you, Councilmember. Yeah, so naturally occurring affordable housing, I think, is an umbrella term to refer to units that are out there in the community They're being rented at a rate that is affordable to certain people at different AMI levels, right? And so what we're hoping to do with a program like the Housing Preservation Program is say, you are an owner of one of those buildings, and you have a significant amount of rehab that needs to get done, and the rent that you're collecting isn't enough to actually take out a loan to do that work. You come to the URA, we're enter into an agreement with you to give you the funds to do the work that needs to get done to fix up that building, and then in exchange, we're going to make those units permanently affordable for 40 years. So that's basically the exchange there for us. Yeah.
Thank you for that. It's helpful. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Cool. Thank you. And thank you all for being here. This is really exciting. And I really look forward to deploying these dollars. Motion to adjourn?
So move.
We are adjourned.